Welcome. This is part 1. This series is going to be more than a movie breakdown. It's an autopsy of belief, how it's inherited, reinforced, and then unraveled by someone who understands its fragility. Heretic is about dangerous ideas, not the loud, obvious kind, but the ones disguised as compassion, logic, or certainty. Ideas that become weapons when placed in the hands of someone who craves control. Because there's a lot to unpack here, this could have been one massive video, but 4 to 5 hours, I think that's a lot for anyone. So instead, what I'm gonna do is break it into a series, parts that let us really dig in without losing sight of all the details. This is something I've been excited to do for a while now, so here it is, finally. And in this part 1, we begin with how it all starts. Not with confrontation, but with quiet questions about belief. The movie opens with Paxton telling Barnes, our two protagonists, Magnum condoms are the same size as regular condoms, or at least that's what she heard. It's such a casual, almost throwaway line, but it's funny because, in a way, that statement sums up the entire movie. That phrasing, I heard, or I was told that, becomes a reoccurring undercurrent throughout the movie. It's how most of the characters talk about what they believe, not because they've verified it, not because they've lived it, but because someone else told them it was true. And that's exactly how a lot of people, especially those raised in rigid religious environments, build their entire worldview. It's not built through this personal experience or trial and error that we expect many other people have gone through. It's handed down, repeated, reinforced, which is, again, also common. Belief becomes something you inherit, not something you choose. And eventually, that belief gets so deeply embedded that you stop questioning whether it came from a reliable source. You just accept it, because that's what I heard becomes that's what I believe. And that way, the condom comment is more than just a setup for a joke. It's a microcosm of the film's bigger question. How much of what we believe, especially about sex, morality, and salvation, is actually ours? And how much of it is borrowed, regurgitated, or blindly inherited? There's an irony in opening a film about theology, identity, and control with a line about condoms, a product that directly intersects with all of those things, but in a context that's awkward or taboo for the characters. It shows us right away that Paxton has heard things about the world. Sexual things, secular things, but has no real frame of reference to confirm them. She's repeating something she doesn't fully understand, again, like most people. And that's not a dig at her intelligence or for, again, all of those people. It's just a reflection of how sheltered she's been. How much of her life has been lived under the shadow of rules, hearsay, and secondhand knowledge. And it makes you wonder, what else has she heard? What beliefs is she carrying that might not stand up to scrutiny? And what happens when that carefully constructed framework of I was told starts to fall apart? The two start unpacking the semantics of the statement, and things quickly get a little more absurd. Barnes brings up a real-world example. Her sister's ex-husband, who apparently had one so massive he needed magnums, and her sister described it as like an elephant's trunk. It's a ridiculous image. It's obviously not true, and it plays like a punchline. But beneath the humor, there's something more interesting going on here. This exchange isn't just some goofy, juvenile sex talk. It's a look into how people process the taboo through exaggeration, myth-making, and secondhand knowledge. These girls aren't speaking from direct experience, obviously not. Instead, they're cobbling together their understanding of sex and anatomy from what they've been told by either friends, by siblings, by media, or by their very religious gatekeepers. There's a layer of detachment in the way they talk about it. like they're studying a subject they're not supposed to fully grasp yet. And that's kind of the point. They've been raised in a belief system that discourages direct exploration of sexuality. So what they know about it is filtered through euphemism, rumor, and the occasional porn video they probably weren't supposed to see. So even when they're joking, there's a weird discomfort underneath it. The elephant's trunk line is funny, but it also reveals how foreign and exaggerated sex becomes when it's pushed into the realm of the forbidden. It turns something natural into something monstrous or laughable, a thing to fear, mock, or mystify. And that's a powerful reflection of how deeply religion, or more specifically, this religious control, can distort basic human experiences, not just by denying them, but by turning them into those half-formed ideas we're not equipped to deal with when the time finally comes. Then Paxton pivots to another subject, a porno she just happened to watch. She brings it up in this deliberately casual way, like she's trying not to make a big deal out of it, but of course, it is a big deal, especially for someone who's grown up in a world where even acknowledging the existence of porn is taboo. The way she tells it, the video was nothing out of the ordinary, just your average run-of-the-mill adult film. But then she adds this little observation. She thinks the woman in the video looked sad, ashamed even. And that's where things get interesting, because maybe she's right. Maybe that woman really was ashamed, and maybe there's a genuine human emotion slipping through the surface, especially of an industry that's often accused of masking pain with performance. But, and this is the crucial point, maybe she's been told for so long that sex work is inherently degrading, that porn is a kind of spiritual rot, that she's primed to read guilt and sadness into the face of any woman who participates in it. It's not about what's objectively true. It's about what she's been conditioned to believe. The film never tells us which interpretation is correct, and that ambiguity is kind of the point. It leaves that moment unresolved, forcing us to sit in that uncertainty. Just like so much of Heretic, it's less about what's real and more about what we think is real, what we believe to be true based on hearsay, doctrine, and inherited guilt. Paxton's observation isn't just about the woman in the video. It's also a mirror held up to her own internal conflict, her own attempt to reconcile curiosity with conditioning. It's a subtle moment, but it speaks volumes about the quiet war going on inside her. And that's also kind of the point. These are just offhand conversations, the kind of things two young women might chat about to pass the time, but the weight of them becomes more obvious the further into the movie you go. What initially plays as idle talk about condoms and porn quietly becomes the thematic bedrock of the entire story. Not, again, necessarily condoms and porn, not that obviously, but these conversations aren't just about sex or shame, they're about belief. They're about how people come to know things, or at least think they know them. Because under the surface, the film is asking bigger, more uncomfortable questions. What do we believe? Who taught us to believe it? And how much of that belief is actually rooted in lived experience or fact, versus what we've just been told to accept without question? It's no accident that these characters wrestle with secondhand knowledge, whether it's Paxton repeating what she heard about Magnum condoms or projecting assumed shame onto a woman in a porn video. These moments speak to a larger phenomenon, the way people inherit ideas without ever interrogating where they came from. In religious contexts especially, so much of a person's worldview is shaped by stories passed down from authority figures, parents, church leaders, all spoken with certainty, but not always with truth. And in that light, this early dialogue isn't filler, it's a blueprint. It shows us how belief is formed, how bias creeps in unnoticed, and how something as mundane as a conversation about porn can expose the fragile scaffolding of inherited morality. After that, things lighten up a bit. The girls laugh, they poke fun at each other, and for a moment, we see a glimpse of who they are beneath the missionary facade. They're not robotic zealots marching in lockstep with doctrine. They're not just young women. Curious, playful, a little awkward. They joke, they tease, they make casual references to pop culture. And in these small moments, they feel real. Like people with inner lives, not just spiritual assignments. And that makes it kind of sad, honestly, because underneath the laughter, there's this quiet tension, the sense that they're brushing up against a world they're not really allowed to be a part of. Just by being out here exposed to new environments and people, they're getting tiny, fleeting glimpses of freedom. Not necessarily freedom in the sinful or rebellious sense, but a freedom of choice. Freedom to explore, to question, to live without a strict roadmap laid out for them by faith. It makes you wonder, do they ever feel tempted? Not by specific sins, but by the idea that more is possible. More experiences, more perspectives, a wider world that doesn't fit neatly into the belief system they were handed. There's a melancholy in that, the tension between who they are and who they're expected to be. And the film doesn't have to spell it out. It's in the small moments, the laughter, the lingering looks. It's subtle, but it's there. This becomes even more obvious when they run into a group of girls about their age or so at a crosswalk. Paxton watches them with a kind of quiet admiration. She even says,
"Oh my gosh, I already love these girls."
and there's a softness in her voice, not envy exactly, but something close. She's drawn to their carefree, playful energy. The way they laugh, move, and just exist without hesitation, it's aspirational. Like she's glimpsing an alternate version of herself. One that never had to knock on doors or memorize scripture. One that got to just be. But when they try to interact, the vibe shifts immediately. The other girls treat the missionaries like a spectacle, a novelty, like something to gawk at, not connect with. It's not necessarily malicious, not exactly. More like the uncomfortable curiosity people have toward things they don't understand. And in that moment, Paxton and Barnes aren't people anymore. They're costumes, they're stereotypes, living memes of religious conservatism. And it stings. You can see it on their faces. The way Paxton's openness is met with mockery, the way a genuine attempt at connection is met with weird questions and crude jokes. It's not just a failed social interaction. It's a reminder that the outside world doesn't really see them, not as individuals at least, just as symbols of something strange and repressive. And that hurts in a very specific way, because it reinforces their isolation. Even when they admire others, even when they try to bridge the gap, they're still outsiders, still the weird girls in skirts. One of the girls even asks Paxton if she wears magic underwear before yanking down her skirt.
Is it true?
Is what true?
Do you wear magic underwear?
What?
A moment that's both played for laughs and deeply uncomfortable. And yeah, just to be clear, the magic underwear is real. Obviously it's not magic, but in Mormonism they're called temple garments, and both men and women who've gone through certain religious rites are expected to wear them under their clothes pretty much all of the time. They're not actually magic, of course, but they're loaded with symbolic meaning. Officially, they represent a sacred covenant between the individual and God, a constant physical reminder of their faith and the promises they've made. But again, depending on who you ask, the symbolism can get more complicated. Some say the garments are a source of spiritual protection. Others argue they serve more as a tool of control, a way to enforce modesty and obedience by literally keeping the body under wraps. It's one of those things that might feel deeply personal and spiritual to one person and deeply oppressive to another. And that's part of what makes that skirt pulling moment hit much harder. It's not just teasing, it's a violation of something Paxton considers sacred. It's also a power dynamic. These non-religious girls are asserting dominance, unbeknownst to them, probably, in a way that Paxton and Barnes aren't prepared for. And even though it's just a fleeting moment, it speaks volumes about how these missionaries are perceived, not as people, but as punchlines. But outside of the faith, they're often seen as bizarre, unfamiliar, even a little creepy. It's not just that people don't understand them, it's that they represent something hidden, something private that's been ritualized and enforced. On Reddit threads like the ones on r/Mormon and ex-Mormon forums, you'll find ex-members talking about how the garments didn't make them feel holy. They made them feel watched, controlled, like their own body wasn't entirely theirs, but an object of religious ownership, a tool for obedience. Wearing them wasn't just about devotion, it was about submission, a quiet but constant reminder that you're always accountable to something bigger, and that even your own skin isn't off limits. So of course, Paxton walks away from that interaction feeling hurt and humiliated. She says that people think Mormons are weird, and not to be cruel, but she's right. That is the general consensus. Mormonism is one of the most misunderstood and least mainstream denominations of Christianity. And because it asks its members to behave in ways that are radically different from the rest of the culture, it does often invite ridicule, or at the very least, confusion. People don't get it. They don't understand why something as simple as a belief system can demand such drastic changes to the way someone lives. And because of that, it's easy to paint them as strange or even dangerous. But that weirdness is just the surface of a deeper story, one that's rooted in centuries of faith, conviction, and a strong sense of community. Still, none of that matters when you're on the outside looking in, especially when the rest of the world is only too eager to keep you on the fringe. It's a painful thing to watch because, Paxton isn't just upset about what others think. She's grappling with the isolation that comes with being part of a faith that sets you apart from everyone else. That sense of being different, not quite fitting in, is something she carries with her constantly. The ridicule might sting, but it's the feeling of being alienated that cuts deeper. She wants to be understood, but the world doesn't seem interested in giving her that grace. But the key here is that Paxton knows. She's not oblivious to what people think. That skirt-pulling moment isn't her first experience with this kind of judgment. It's just the latest in a lifetime of small humiliations, moments that chip away at her confidence and sense of belonging. She's been on the receiving end of these subtle jabs for years, whispers, side eyes, the quiet exclusion. And every time, she absorbs it, internalizing it as if it's somehow her own fault. The way she handles it is quietly devastating. She doesn't lash out or confront people, she just carries it. Each slight becomes part of the heavy weight she bears in silence. It's not the one big blow that breaks you. It's the slow, steady accumulation of these moments that wear you down until they start to define how you see yourself. There's something deeply human about realizing that the thing you were raised to believe in, to devote your life to, is treated like a joke by the outside world. For Paxton, it's not just about being different. It's the painful awareness that the very core of her identity, the faith she's built her life around, is dismissed and ridiculed. It's not just rejection, it's a humiliation that cuts deeper than any insult, because it touches the very thing she holds most sacred. Barnes, meanwhile, handles it a little differently. She stays calm, her demeanor steady, as she locks up their bikes outside Mr. Reed's house. When the topic comes up, she casually admits that she's been aware of the ridicule for a long time. She doesn't shy away from it. She even brings up South Park, pointing out how it satirized Mormons. And then, in a moment of surprising disarming honesty. She says she kind of gets it. Some of the jokes are actually funny. There's no defensiveness, no need to pretend the world's perception is wrong. Instead, Barnes acknowledges it with a quiet self-assurance. That's a surprisingly mature perspective, one that shows that she's not in denial. She doesn't feel the need to protect her faith from scrutiny or mockery, because she can separate the core of what she believes from the nonsense that's made about it. She's able to laugh at herself, and in doing so, she shows a kind of wisdom that Paxton might still be searching for. Barnes doesn't just accept the ridicule. She can step back and recognize the absurdity in some aspects of her faith. But that doesn't make her any less devout. In fact, it may even deepen her commitment. It doesn't invalidate what she believes. It makes her more human. It's a reminder that belief doesn't have to be blind. It can be thoughtful, reflective, and even a little self-aware. Maybe that's what this whole sequence is trying to show us, that these girls are people first. Before the religion, before the rules, they're not zealots or missionaries in the way we usually imagine them. Standing on the street corners, knocking on doors with unwavering conviction, holding signs that say the end is nigh. No, they're just two young women trying to live up to something they didn't choose, grappling with the faith that was handed to them. They're navigating a world that doesn't take them seriously, a world that makes them feel like outsiders for simply existing as they are. In that struggle, they reflect something a lot of us can relate to, the desire to be understood, even when what you believe in makes that almost impossible. It's the tension of trying to stay true to your values, while also dealing with the reality that those values may not be accepted, or even respected, by the people around you. It's about balancing personal identity with external perception, and that push and pull is something we all experience in all different forms, whether it's faith, family expectations, or anything that shapes who we are. We just all want to feel seen for who we truly are, not just the labels or stereotypes that others impose on us. Just as it begins to rain, the pair are seen knocking on Mr. Reed's door. There's a flicker of apprehension between them, a moment of hesitation as they brace themselves for whatever this next conversation might bring. They exchange a few quick words, hyping each other up, trying to summon the confidence that's expected of them. But the tension is palpable. Suspiciously, Mr. Reed takes a long time to answer. We don't see what's happening behind the door, but we hear faint noises, shuffling, something being moved or adjusted. It's subtle, but unsettling. Almost like he's preparing something, cleaning up, moving furniture, hiding something, whatever it is. It puts just the slightest crack in the veneer of this routine visit. It's the first hint that something might be off, not just with Mr. Reed, but with everything that's about to unfold.
Good afternoon.
Finally, the door swings open. Mr. Reed greets them with a warm, welcoming smile. The tension breaks immediately, and the girl's anxiety melts away. His demeanor is calm, even friendly, disarming in a way that feels almost too perfect. After a quick introduction, they begin their pitch, asking if he'd like to learn more about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That is a mouthful. Instead of showing genuine interest, Mr. Reed seems uncertain, polite, but distant. His name had been on their list, supposedly one of the people who agreed to hear them out. And yet, his hesitation suggests otherwise. It's hard to tell whether he's changed his mind or if he never agreed in the first place. That subtle disconnect lingers in the air, adding to the growing sense that something here doesn't quite line up. They begin their usual speech, though one they've likely practiced a dozen times before, but are quickly interrupted when Mr. Reed asks if they'd like to come inside, since the rain is getting heavier. The invitation gives them pause. For a moment, they hesitate. It's not just about stepping out of the rain, it's about stepping over a boundary. In Mormonism, there are strict cultural expectations around modesty and propriety, especially for missionaries. These rules are rooted in a long-standing emphasis on avoiding situations that could be perceived as morally compromising. For instance, young female missionaries are discouraged, even prohibited, from being alone with men in private settings. There's a strong preference for always having a third party present, usually another woman, to ensure accountability and avoid even the appearance of impropriety.
You can't come inside unless another woman is present, but
This caution comes from a broader cultural history within Mormonism, where modesty is deeply tied to morality and purity. The doctrine teaches that one's body is sacred, a gift from God, and must be protected, not just in action, but in appearance and context. This has led to numerous unwritten social rules, particularly affecting women, who are taught from a young age that their modesty is not just about their own virtue, but also about safeguarding the moral environments for others. To outsiders, these strictures can seem extreme or even oppressive. Former members and critics of the church have pointed out how this kind of modesty culture can foster guilt, shame, and a warped sense of personal responsibility, as though merely being seen in the wrong place at the wrong time could reflect a moral failing. On online forums like r/ex-Mormon, many ex-members share how these teachings impacted their sense of autonomy and self-worth, framing even innocent actions as potential gateways to sin. In this moment, that weight is visible in the girls' hesitation. They share a quiet look, their uncertainty unspoken but mutual. There's no joke or comment, just the silence of two people who have been taught that something as mundane as stepping into a man's home can carry enormous implications.
that's fine with you.
It's just for safety.
That fear is real. It's been ingrained in them from the start. Still, after a brief moment of silent deliberation, they accept. They step inside. As they do, Mr. Reed offers to take their coats. The gesture is ordinary, even considerate. Paxton makes an offhand comment about having gained weight lately, to which Mr. Reed replies with a smile, saying his wife loves to bake. It feels like normal small talk until he adds something strange and completely out of place. He just casually mentions that the walls and ceilings have metal in them.
Oh, one thing, the walls and ceilings have metal in them. I hope that's okay.
You don't mind?
The moment is bizarre, not overtly threatening, but undeniably odd. It lands with a strange weight in the air, a detail that makes no sense, yet is delivered so plainly that it's hard to question. Barnes responds without blinking, saying they don't mind. Her reaction, like so many in the film, reflects how much these young women are conditioned to believe and accept things they're told, to smooth things over, to stay polite and agreeable and unfazed, even when something doesn't quite add up. Meanwhile, Paxton continues the conversation with the cheerful note about how much she enjoys pie, a detail that might seem inconsequential but becomes meaningful later. It's a tiny thread tugged gently here that will unravel more fully as the story continues. All of these moments, the awkward hesitation, the strange aside about metal walls, the casual chat about dessert, blend together to build the film's unnerving tone. The tension isn't in loud jump scares or shocking violence, but in the quiet weirdness of everyday interactions. It's a house that feels almost too normal, too polite, and that's what makes it so unsettling. As the two stand in the living room, they begin to glance around. The space feels curated, filled with comforting, ordinary details that seem deliberately placed to put visitors at ease. But it's almost too perfect, too welcoming, like a stage set designed to lull people into a sense of security. Barnes walks over to a hexagonal window with the moth resting on the glass. The shape of the window, six-sided, symmetrical, carries symbolic weight. In many belief systems, hexagons represent harmony, balance, and structure, but also the mysterious patterns found in nature, like beehives or snowflakes. In sacred geometry, the hexagon is often associated with the interconnection of the spiritual and material worlds, an elegant and stable design that underpins both man-made and natural systems. Its presence here might suggest an imposed order, a framework of control meticulously constructed by Mr. Reed, mirroring the theological and psychological architecture that shapes the film's world. The window itself appears almost ritualistic, more ornate than functional. And the fact that it draws attention to itself so clearly might hint at its purpose beyond mere decoration. It serves as a symbolic lens, framing the scene in which Barnes is both observer and participant. The moth, too, is significant. Moths are often drawn to light, symbolizing a kind of blind faith or attraction to something that might ultimately destroy them. In spiritual symbolism, moths can represent vulnerability, transformation, or even the soul's yearning for truth, often at great personal risk. The one resting on the hexagonal window before flying up toward the ceiling light is a quiet, ominous image. It mirrors the girl's situation, drawn toward what they believe is a source of safety or enlightenment, yet unknowingly edging closer to something sinister. The moth's movement from the window to the artificial ceiling light also evokes a transition from natural patterns of guidance to manipulated ones, suggesting the danger of following a constructed path without question, a core theme echoed throughout the film. After what feels like an eternity, Mr. Reed returns. He brings with him some drinks and a candle, promising that pie will be coming soon. Barnes gently reminds him that they need his wife to be present before they can continue, but Mr. Reed just brushes it off with a casual tone, continuing the conversation as though it's unimportant. He starts by saying what he thinks.
I think it is good to be religious.
Barnes replies that it's nice to hear. She adds that she feels religion is no longer the center of culture, and Mr. Reed solemnly agrees, remarking that it's fading. Just as Paxton is about to start her pitch, he asks them where they're from. Paxton excitingly tells him that she is from Ogden, Utah. Ogden doesn't have as many Mormons. While Utah is often seen as a stronghold for the LDS Church, there are regional differences. Ogden, known more for its railroad history and urban grit, doesn't have the same level of overt religiosity as places like Provo. Still, Utah remains the symbolic and organizational heartland of Mormonism, with Salt Lake City as the headquarters and a deeply rooted cultural infrastructure supporting the church's operation. Paxton also adds that she is one of 8 daughters, a large family size that isn't uncommon in devout Mormon households. Large families are often encouraged within LDS doctrine, which values procreation as a spiritual responsibility. The emphasis on eternal families and the belief in a premortal existence where spirits await earthly bodies gives added weight to having many children. For women like Paxton, being part of such a large sibling group can shape identity, competition, and expectations around womanhood and motherhood. Moving over to Barnes, Paxton answers for her, saying she's from Salt Lake City, but Barnes quickly corrects her and says she's originally from Philadelphia. Something interesting to note is that Mr. Reed then asks if they were raised in the church. Paxton obviously says yes, but Barnes was not. Her mother converted later in life, and after Barnes' father died, it seems like they were drawn into the church out of grief, searching for meaning or stability. Whether they were religious before that is unclear, but it's evident that Barnes was not raised in this lifestyle from the beginning. Her relationship to the faith is more recent, more circumstantial, and perhaps more fragile. Mr. Reed speaks with a somber understanding, acknowledging how meaningful and difficult it is to find a doctrine you truly believe in. It's a comment that feels personal, almost confessional, as if he's been wrestling with that very struggle for some time. He then shifts his tone, stating ominously,
What is the one true religion?
a question that lands heavy in the air. Barnes is visibly unsettled. She's caught off guard, unsure whether it was the earlier comment about spiritual hardship or maybe the implication of exclusive truth that shook her. Her expression turns inward, entranced by the weight of the thought. Before the silence can stretch too long, Paxton steps in, grounding the conversation with practicalities. She reminds the group that they were told to prioritize other investigators, a term specific to Mormon missionary work. In Latter-day Saint (LDS) terminology, An investigator refers to someone who is actively exploring or learning about the faith but hasn't yet been baptized. Missionaries are encouraged to focus their time on those who show the most potential interest or spiritual readiness, which can sometimes feel transactional or even dismissive when expressed bluntly. Mr. Reed seems quietly offended by the phrasing. The implication that he was not a priority stings, but sensing this, Paxton quickly backpedals. She clarifies that she didn't mean it that way, that he seems like a spiritually curious person. She even goes so far as to compare him to Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism. Like Reed, Smith was once an investigator himself, not of the LDS Church, of course, but of broader Christianity. As a teenager in the early 1800s, Smith attended various churches, each claiming to be the path to salvation. His confusion and dissatisfaction with the conflicting doctrines led him to pray for divine guidance, which, according to LDS belief, resulted in the first vision, a theophany in which God and Jesus Christ appeared to him and instructed him not to join any existing denomination. Smith's search for the one true religion thus mirrors the same question that now lingers in the room, unsettling, provocative, and deeply personal. Mr. Reed proceeds to ask them about Joseph Smith, to which he gives the brief story of how he came about the golden plates, which were foundational in the Book of Mormon in 1823. Joseph Smith claimed he was visited by an angel named Moroni, who told him of a set of golden plates buried in a hillside near his home in Palmyra, New York. I think that's how you say it, Palmyra.
Palmyra?
These plates were said to contain the writings of ancient prophets who had lived on the American continent, written in what Smith called Reformed Egyptian. According to Smith, he was not permitted to retrieve the plates until 1827, and after several years of preparation and divine instruction, when he finally obtained them, Smith began a process of translation that he said was guided by revelation. He used instruments referred to as the Urim and Thummim, described as seer stones mounted in a frame like spectacle, to aid in translation. He also used a separate seer stone placed into a hat to block out light during the dictation process. This translation became the Book of Mormon, published in 1830, which is considered scripture by members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Once the translation was complete, Smith claimed that the plates were returned to the angel and are no longer available. After retelling them the story, he sets the copy of the Book of Mormon down on the table for them to see, which is his own. It's clear he's been reading it, or at least spending time with it, judging by the cluster of sticky notes jutting out from nearly every edge. Both Paxton and Barnes are taken aback, visibly impressed. Paxton even jokes that he's read more than they have.
You read more than we do.
Barnes, though, is growing quietly uneasy. Her eyes flick between the book and Reed, and after a beat, she comments, a little too brightly, that the pie smells amazing. That seems to trigger something in Mr. Reed. He glances at her, a flicker of something unreadable passing over his face, as if he's suddenly aware that she might be catching on to how strange this all is. Just as quickly, he pivots, once again, lightening the mood by asking if they can guess what kind of pie just by the smell. Paxton leans in a bit, gives a sniff, and confidently says, blueberry. Almost out of nowhere, and with a sharpness that borders on aggressive, Mr. Reed turns to Barnes and asks how her father died. The question just hangs in the air, heavy and unexpected. Barnes freezes, stunned by the sudden shift and clearly unsure how to respond. There's a pause before Mr. Reed seems to realize what he's done. He quickly backtracks, muttering an apology and saying he shouldn't have asked. Even so, Barnes answers, her voice small and barely above a whisper. Mr. Reed mishears it. Blueberry disease, he repeats, eyebrows raised. For a second, he thinks she's joking and he lets out a small laugh. Who wouldn't want that, he says, trying to play into what he assumes is a light-hearted deflection. He keeps going, riffing off the comment with the kind of misplaced enthusiasm. But Barnes doesn't laugh. Her face is frozen, caught between disbelief and discomfort. Her lips trying to form a smile that just never quite lands. It lingers awkwardly, a fractured mask that slips more with each passing second. Paxton steps in, gently correcting him. The room seems to drop a few degrees. Mr. Reed falters, the realization finally dawning on him. He stammers out another apology, but the damage is done. Barnes hasn't moved, still holding that half smile, not out of grace, but out of confusion, or maybe disbelief at what just happened. And beneath Mr. Reed's apology, there's something off, a tone too polished, too rehearsed. Sincerity, worn like a costume, without skipping a beat, as if the last exchange hadn't just happened. Mr. Reed leans in slightly and asks Barnes if she's seen any sign of her father, as in a ghost. The question lands with a strange weight, casual in tone, but sharp in implication. In Mormon belief, the afterlife is structured into multiple kingdoms, and spirits are said to dwell in a sort of intermediate state called the spirit world before the final resurrection. While mainstream doctrine doesn't dwell much on ghosts in the traditional sense, stories of visitations or spiritual impressions from deceased loved ones aren't unheard of in Mormon communities. These are often interpreted as signs of comfort or unfinished business, though they're typically framed within a very spiritual and not supernatural lens. Barnes doesn't answer right away. Her hand is drifted absent-mindedly to her arm, rubbing at a spot just above her bicep. When she finally does speak, it's soft, almost like she has to force the word out of herself.
It's okay.
Mr. Reed nods slowly, but there's something cold and calculating behind it. Strange, he mutters, eyes locked on the scar she keeps rubbing. He doesn't ask about it. He doesn't have to. The way he stares says enough. Barnes shifts in her seat. Mr. Reed once again circles back, apologizing for the entire exchange, about the pie, about Barnes' father. His voice is soft this time, almost remorseful. Barnes nods, her lips barely moving as she mutters, but her eyes are darting around the room, her smile slipping away into a quiet panic that's slowly taking root in her posture. Whatever claim she was holding on to is starting to crack, and just when it seems like the whole meeting is beyond saving, soured beyond recovery, Paxton speaks up, her tone light but trembling at the edges. She says that when she dies, she wants to come back as a butterfly, so she can follow the people she loves. She'd land right on their hand, she says, just long enough so that they'd know it was her. The table goes quiet. Paxton gives a faint, nervous smile, like she's relieved to have finally said it out loud, but still unsure how it might land. There's something deeply personal in the way she says it, kind of soft desperation, like it's something she's carried for a long time but never dared to share. All of a sudden, the power goes out in the house. The quiet whir of electricity vanishes, replaced by an uneasy stillness. Mr. Reed barely reacts.
Apologies, that is a foible of the house.
He says, almost too casually, like it's nothing out of the ordinary. Hoping to pivot things back to something lighter, he changes the subject with an easy smile. I should have offered you both some water, he says, then adds with a knowing look, since the word of wisdom forbids caffeine and alcohol. It's the kind of comment that sounds harmless, maybe even friendly, but something about the way he says it feels deliberate, like the beginning of a subtle mind game. His claim isn't entirely unfounded, but it's not exactly true either. The word of wisdom, part of the LDS scripture and the Doctrine and Covenants, outlines a health code that discourages alcohol, tobacco, and hot drinks, a phrase that early Mormon leaders interpreted to mean coffee or tea. For decades, many members extended that to mean all caffeine, creating a kind of unofficial taboo around soda and energy drinks. But in recent years, the church clarified its stance. Caffeine itself isn't forbidden, only coffee and tea are specifically discouraged. Barnes, perhaps sensing something in his tone, quietly counters, while it doesn't strictly mention caffeinated drinks. She's right, and she knows it. Her tone is soft, but the correction lands. But again, this is Mr. Reed, quietly testing the waters, setting the stage for a larger point he's building towards. That if something as supposedly sacred as the Word of God can be interpreted in so many conflicting ways, then what does that say about its clarity or authority? One person says caffeine is good, another says it's sinful, and yet both claim to be following the same doctrine. It's just one of countless examples of how easily belief fractures, how endlessly people debate over what was supposedly meant to be divine truth. Mr. Reed leads into another question, an awkward one, he warns, but something he claims will add depth to their conversation. He hesitates before asking, giving the girls a moment to get curious. They playfully offer a drum roll, nervous but amused. Then he finally just drops it.
How do you feel about polygamy?
The room just goes quiet. The air shifts. The girls' smiles fade as the energy drains from the room. He clarifies, just in case it wasn't clear, he wants to know how they feel about a man having multiple wives. He looks at them expectantly, watching closely. Paxton eventually breaks the silence, admitting that it's just not for her. Barnes chimes in too, asking if he's talking from a biblical perspective. Historically, the question cuts right to the heart of one of the most controversial chapters in Mormonism. In the early days of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS, plural marriage was more commonly known as polygamy, was practiced by church leaders, most notably Joseph Smith and Brigham Young. The church taught that this was a divine principle revealed by God meant to raise up seed unto the Lord and strengthen the faithful community. But public outcry, legal battles, and political pressure mounted, and by 1890, under threat of the US government, sanctions and potential seizure of church assets, LDS President Wilford Woodruff issued the manifesto, officially ending the practice of polygamy in the mainstream church. This wasn't an immediate clean break. Some continued practicing it quietly for years, but it marked the beginning of the faith's shift toward distancing itself from plural marriage. Mr. Reed acknowledges that history, the misogynistic patriarchal foundation of it, but says he's less interested in the past and more focused on how the modern church has chosen to interpret and distance itself from it. That shift, he notes, is a perfect example of how doctrine changes, how something once claimed to be divinely ordained can be reinterpreted or even erased when it becomes inconvenient. He then proceeds to point out the contradiction. How interesting it is, he says, that the early church used revelation to justify the practice of polygamy, presenting it as divinely commanded. And yet, when the cultural and political climate turned against it, another revelation conveniently arrived to rescind the doctrine. What was once sacred became a stain, and revelation, supposedly unchanging and from God, was used to both establish and erase it. Mr. Reed looks over at Paxton, a quizzical, almost scrutinizing expression, kind of skeptical patience, as if he's studying her reaction as much as he's awaiting it. She responds with a nervous tone, saying, "Yeah, it's sketch for sure." Her tone caught somewhere between uncertainty and discomfort. The honesty of her answer breaks the tension, prompting a brief chuckle from Mr. Reed. Barnes quickly follows up, trying to reframe the issue. She insists that polygamy wasn't abolished because it was grotesque or morally questionable, but simply because it was no longer necessary. Its purpose, she argues, had run its course. Mr. Reed, finally ready to weigh in, leans forward and says that he worries, emphasizing the word, that Joseph Smith may have legitimized polygamy as a means to justify having affairs with other women. He brings up Emma Smith, Joseph's wife, and how she was reportedly devastated upon discovering that he had slept with a 16-year-old maid. From there, Mr. Reed speculates that Smith crafted the idea of divine revelation as a way to sidestep consequences, a theological loophole to make such behavior acceptable under the guise of divine will. After a pause, he concludes with a solemn, "With great power comes great responsibility." Paxton, trying to lighten the mood, immediately interjects with Spider-Man, assuming a pop culture reference, but Mr. Reed, now fully serious, glances at her with a flat expression and corrects her. Voltaire. Paxton, taken aback and slightly embarrassed, mutters, "Right," as the weight of the conversation settles back in. Mr. Reed then poses a thought to the room, framing it as a genuine concern, that polygamy, in his view, holds no real spiritual merit. Barnes, trying to gather her composure, softly counters that. This feels like something of a distortion. Mr. Reed, reacting with a mix of curiosity and quiet amusement, points out that the church's own documented history seems to support what he sees as a manipulative and controlling tactic. His words hang in the air. Barnes is visibly rattled, asks in a trembling voice, "Is that true?" Paxton, more defensive than before, blurts out, "I'm sorry, I don't know where you're getting this." Mr. Reed, now leaning more into the core of his doubt, replies calmly but firmly, "If revelation from God is filtered through man, flawed and sinful as we are, how do we know any of it is true?" The question lingers, heavy and unresolved. Paxton responds as if she had been bracing for this moment, answering with quiet confidence, that they know it's true because of how it makes them feel. Mr. Reed, suddenly, clapping his hands with a loud and jarring "bingo," breaks the tension in a way that feels almost inappropriate, like he's misread the tone of the room entirely. He chuckles, as though the conversation had been a friendly debate rather than what it had become, and says, "That's exactly right." He continues, now echoing her sentiment, that what truly matters is a personal relationship with God. Barnes, her tone low but resolved, cuts in. "I'll talk with my bishop about all of this." It's not so much a rebuttal as it is a signal, an attempt to steer the meeting to a close, to regain control of the moment, and perhaps to finally leave. Immediately after Barnes says that, probably interrupting any other thing she had to say, he diverts the conversation once again, this time in a seemingly random and unrelated way. Asking what their favorite fast food is, Barnes says that they try not to eat it, but with Mr. Reed playfully saying that we all try not to, but we all have a favorite. Paxton, once again ready for this, proceeds with saying, "Burger King is better than Carl's Jr., which is better than Raleigh's or Rayleigh's, which is better than Wendy's, which is better than In-N-Out, which is better than McDonald's, which is better than Jack in the Box, which is better than nothing." Though, personally, I wouldn't rank Burger King better than Carl's Jr. That in itself is a declaration of war. In-N-Out should be way higher on that list, probably second to Carl's Jr., but the rest is fine though. Barnes adds that because Jack in the Box serves breakfast all day, implying that it isn't that bad. Paxton, in a moment of relief and almost childlike wonder, exclaims in a muted but louder than usual volume saying, "I love breakfast." Mr. Reed asks, "What about Taco Bell?" Barnes responds with a serious look and tone, "We don't talk about Taco Bell." Mr. Reed, curious, follows up with, "Why don't we talk about Taco Bell?" To which Paxton replies with, "We'd have to talk about Taco Bell to talk about why we don't talk about Taco Bell." Mr. Reed, letting that thread go, circles back and declares that Burger King is the number one since it was at the top of the list. Barnes immediately fires back, saying that she thinks it's trash, with Paxton almost chiming in but stopping herself. Mr. Reed states plainly, "It's not Jack in the Box." Barnes then throws in her vote for Wendy's as the best, and Paxton begrudgingly agrees. And thus, Wendy's is declared the best fast food, but it's actually trash. Mr. Reed then says that he's never had a Wendy, almost sounding ignorant by calling it that, maybe even intentionally so. He follows that by saying that when he first began studying theology, the last thing he wanted to do was discover the Wendy's of religion, meaning the best, most universally agreeable one to practice. He explains that in his exploration, he dabbled in various religions, likening the experience to trying different fast food spots, but after immersing himself in the beliefs and doctrines of many faiths, he came to a sobering realization. The more you know, the less you know. The phrase, "the more you know, the less you know," speaks to the paradox that often accompanies deep study, especially when it comes to religion. The deeper someone digs into theological history, scriptural context, and the human hands that have shaped doctrine over centuries, the harder it becomes to hold onto a singular, unwavering truth. Every answer leads to more questions. It echoes the old idea that ignorance is bliss, and even mirrors findings from psychological studies that suggest those with higher intelligence often struggle more with existential doubt, anxiety, or disillusionment. In religious terms, it helps explain why many intelligent individuals, heavy quotes, become skeptics or vocal critics of organized faith, while the average person might embrace belief more fully or remain spiritually receptive. What starts as a search for truth can instead unravel into a tangled web of contradictions and half-answers. In this light, comparing religion to fast food isn't entirely flippant. The metaphor still kind of holds, not perfectly. But sometimes people aren't looking for the best or most refined truth, just the one that satisfies, feels familiar, or is most easily digestible. He then says by the time that he turned 50, he was malnourished, not physically, but spiritually, tying it back to his fast food metaphor. After sampling every sect, creed, cult, and denomination, he found they all made the same bold claim, that they alone held the truth, but none, he says, could withstand the microscope of debate and study. Every doctrine crumbled under scrutiny. He admits that he kept searching, not because he wanted to find the one true religion, but almost because he hoped not to, perhaps expecting the journey to lead only to more doubt. And then, in a moment that feels both sudden and jarring, he drops the unexpected. He did. That revelation, casually delivered, flips everything. Up to now, Mr. Reed has carried the air of a thoughtful skeptic, maybe even leaning agnostic or quietly atheist. But the statement suggests otherwise. It hints that there's far more going on beneath his surface level questions. That maybe this meeting, this conversation, isn't just casual curiosity or open-ended debate. Maybe it's part of something else, something planned. In an almost last-ditch effort to bring a sense of normalcy back to the meeting, Barnes gently asks if they could finally meet his wife. Mr. Reed, as if he had been waiting for them to bring it up again, smiles and agrees with almost too much enthusiasm. Both women reiterate that she needs to be present, that they just want to meet her. Mr. Reed, wasting no time, stands up and he says he'll go ask if she'd like to come out and join them. But just before stepping out, he reaches for the light switch and switches it back on. Only it's not a switch, it's a crank. A mechanical whir starts up, followed by a slow, steady ticking. It's not just strange, really, and it's also deliberate. The sound echoes faintly through the room. Whatever kind of house this is, whatever kind of meeting this has become, it's clear now. Nothing about it is normal. What have we learned from this entire first interaction? If this is your first time watching the movie, maybe not much, but if you're an attentive watcher, you'll have picked up that something is going on here. Now, debating religion and everything that comes with it is a fairly normal thing for skeptics to do, and not even skeptics even, but especially when they're face to face with practicing members of a religion. But this meeting, this one feels off. There's a tension that isn't just intellectual, it's atmospheric. It hangs in the air like humidity, thick and difficult to ignore. Mr. Reed specifically requested to be on this visitation list, though there's no record or confirmation of that request. That in itself isn't unbelievable because yes, that is something you can actually do, and I know damn well that he did request it. But here's where it gets deeper. This interaction isn't just about theological disagreement. This is about control. It's about testing the boundaries of social decorum under the guise of civil discourse. Mr. Reed isn't just debating, he's probing. He dominates the conversation, interrupts with odd tangents, controls the lighting of the room, and subtly corners them with rhetorical traps. There's a psychological tactic at play here, one commonly used in coercive or manipulative dialogues. It's a method of destabilization, pushing someone into a vulnerable defensive position by flooding them with contradictions, sharp questions and charm-laced hostility. This isn't a conversation, it's a slow unwrapping. The meeting room is casual, but the dynamic is anything but. And when you factor in things like the ticking mechanical light, the conspicuous absence of his wife, and the strange fast food digression used to deflect deeper revelations, it all reads more like a performance than a discussion. The longer you sit with it, the more you realize that Mr. Reed is drawing them, and us, into something far more calculated than spiritual inquiry.